Good afternoon, everyone.
Before we get started, there were a few questions I wanted to answer. People asked if this was the VMware party. Not the VMware party.
We can dance.
This will be better than the VMware party? No, maybe not. But you're already my favorite audience. You gave up beer to be with us, so I appreciate that. And so the promise I made this promise last year, and I said, this will be the best session you attend at VMworld. And I got a comment last year that said, Amit, it was good, but it wasn't the best, it was second best. So this year, my goals are a little bit different. I want to be the second best or better presentation that you've come to at VMworld.
So we're going to need everyone's iDevice or Android device so we can take the survey for you, okay? Yeah.
So I'm Amit Jani. Let me tell you what qualifies us to be up here. I'm a product manager on the vCenter Common Services team. Despite what Justin will tell you my title is, I'm a product manager, and Justin is in tech marketing.
I'm a technical marketing manager, which means I get involved early on in beta, and my pure focus is obviously around vCenter, hence my Twitter name, vCenter Guy, but my focus is on enablement of new technologies and new features that relate to vCenter. And typically get involved every year around the release.
Yeah. So given that this is a deep dive, we've broken the talk into two sections. One will be the what's new in 5.5. Just a quick question. How many of you are on 5.1 today? Okay. Wow. That's great.
Anyone on 5.5? Yes, we got some
Wow.
hands.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Testing
so
it.
I just came from the upgrade session, and there was someone on 2.5. Is anyone on 2.5? They need to upgrade quickly.
Yeah. You'll find out why. We wanted to focus the first half of this conversation on what's new. We will touch on some of the things that we introduced with 5.1 just as a refresher, but we really have some interesting new things we've introduced with vCenter 5.5. I'll go through these in about 20 minutes or so, the deep dive in 20 minutes. And then I think the most interesting part, we call it vCenter what's new and deep dive, but I think most of you probably heard SSO, 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 SSO. And so we're here to really talk about that. And Justin, we have a lot of other things, but Justin will talk about reference architecture, best practices around SSO and vCenter for 5.5. So you will get your SSO fix.
Yeah, one thing that hurt us last year was we gave you the 5.1, we gave you these new components, these new technologies. They had specific configurations, multiple configurations, a lot of deployment options, and we never told you how to do it. We basically just said make up your own mind and choose that. And so this year we really want to highlight the best use case for using our solutions by giving you some, and they're very straightforward, some reference architectures that you can relate to. So.
And we want to answer, there will be questions that come up. We want to answer every single question, so we just ask that you hold it to the end. And we'll definitely answer it. Even if they sweep us out of here, we'll wait in the hallway and we'll answer all the questions we can. Unless you ask us about appliance, and then we're just going to brush you off. No, we'll answer your appliance questions. So I want to start at the beginning. I've been told that's a very good place to start. I want to start with install. So we've made some changes with the installer with the 5.5 release. First, as a refresher, the simple install is actually, it's our best practice. It's what we recommend. It takes all of the components you need to run vCenter and installs it on one machine. It's a very quick and clean install. There is some, we've added in 5.1, you'll notice it was a single sign-on inventory service in vCenter. With 5.5, we've actually added the web client. So the web client is now installed as part of the process. And there was a couple of reasons for this. One is we wanted to make it easy for everyone to get the web client up and running. But there was a second use case here, which is in a rare occasion where SSO doesn't work, it's misconfigured. You don't need to install the rest of the stack. You can still go in and use your web client to admin your SSO services.
And I can guarantee with the changes we did with SSO in 5.5 that you actually won't need that be put into that scenario. The other thing I want to mention, it's all very nice what Amit just said, and I'm not trying to discourage or discredit him. But the simple installer has potential. We want you to deploy your vCenters in 5.5 or even any vCenter. We want to maintain a single virtual machine, and the simple installer is to provide that. However, there's a bit of a gotcha with that because it only takes the default settings automatically. You cannot change like destinations. So if you install, like I would expect most of you to do, install onto a different drive than C, you're going to have to use what we're going to get onto next, the custom installers. So there is a use case if you accept the defaults all on the same machine. The simple installer works very well. But I just wanted to highlight there is a gotcha with that. So, sorry.
So thank you for stealing my thunder, Justin. The next step there will be custom install, and that's exactly what Justin was talking about. We still do recommend the simple install for many of the use cases. So the question would be, why would you possibly want to run the custom installer? And there's really several reasons. One is, for some people, despite best practice, they want to distribute the services that we just talked about, the inventory service and all these others, onto different servers. You would do that through the custom install. So the flexibility is still there. The second use case is really around locations, right? So if you have multi-site, if you have certain components running in one site and you want to stand up another stack in a different geographic site, the custom installer is definitely the way to go for that. And of course, advanced configurations like Justin was talking about. But the install order still remains the same, right? So if you were to do it from the beginning, it's still single sign-on, web client, inventory service, and of course the vCenter server. So I just wanted to quickly refresh people. If you have to install it, we should tell you what it is that you're installing, what the inventory service is. You won't see much change in 5.5, but for those who aren't aware of what they're installing, VMware just making me install this inventory service, it really is a cache of all of your objects outside of the vCenter database, right? And there are several reasons for doing this. One is we want to make vCenter more stable, and the way to do that is to reduce the load that we put against the database. So you're seeing that the inventory service is an external database. It still sits on the same server, but it pulls the load, the caching load, off of the vCenter database. And this is, of course, perfect for clients. So the client, especially the web client, which we'll talk to in a minute, and I'm sure you'll all love it, puts its load on the inventory service instead of the database. So that's basically how it goes. The best practice is still to put this next to the vCenter server because of latency and everything like that. There is one use case here that we wanted to touch on. Is tagging. We introduced tagging in 5.1. I'm not going to spend any cycles here talking about it. It's getting better over time, of course. The goal is to remove custom attributes and have tagging replace it over time. And tagging is specific to inventory service. So if you create a tag, it's stored within the inventory service. And so this is the use case for backing up and, of course, recovering your inventory service.
Yeah, if you've gone through what we told you last year and distributed all your components, and now you're going to say, hey, I'm going to listen to what Justin and Amit said and bring it all back to a single virtual machine. If your inventory service is on a separate machine, then when you reinstall that and you have used tags, we got to back up and restore those tags into the inventory service when you redeploy it locally. Otherwise, we haven't made it easy for you to use tags today, meaning that it is a manual process to create and assign those tags. But we don't want you to lose all that hard work if you have gone down that path.
Exactly. So I just want to quickly change into the web client. This is a personal favorite of mine since that's one of my products. I'm very proud of it. I know many of you can call my baby ugly. It's okay. You can call this baby ugly. I realize that there are some issues, but I just have a quick question. Starting with 5.1, does anybody use the web client?
They have to.
Great. From where I stand, that was everybody in the room.
Yeah. And they love it.
And they love it, right, exactly. So just as a refresher, and I hopefully will make the story better for you. I'm sure you all love it. You don't need to show me your hands. But it is the new client for the virtual infrastructure, right? The VI client, or the desktop client, as we call it, still exists, and we'll touch on that in a minute. But all new functionality is really exposed through the new web client. It has matched legacy functionality to the VI client with a few exceptions, and we will touch on that. And I'm not a marketing person. I can't tell you roadmap, but I can do one of these wink winks and let you know what's coming. And of course, as I said before, all new functionality is really exposed to the web client only. So if you'd like anything that you saw in the keynotes, that all comes to the web client. And of course, it's all browser-based. And you'll see that it really becomes the face of the administrative client. It is the administrative client going forward. So we highly encourage everybody to move from the VI client to the web client. There's a couple of things here. One, what are the big new features? We've added macOS support, right? We found out about this company called Apple. I don't know if any of you have heard about it, so we decided to support it. And so that's basically where we are with 5.5. And this is full Apple support, full Mac support. In 5.1, we informally supported it without device support and console support. It's all there now. Justin assured me there was going to be a standing ovation for this, so thank you. You helped me. He owes me a beer now, so I appreciate that. And there are other new minor features that have been added, right? There's a drag and drop and filters and to help you find the objects. We won't get into great detail, but it really is supposed to complete the web app feel to it, right? So it should feel like a native application to you.
But Amit, let me jump in here. There's one thing that you've missed with the web client with 5.5 that was kind of a bit of a pain in 5.1 was the response times, the right-click menus, things like that. We've not really published much on other than what you see on the slide here. But if you follow any of the social networking, you can see the comments from other customers, bloggers. They're outstandingly in favor of the 5.5 web client from a performance aspect with the response times on navigation and things like that. To me, that's the one reason to go all the way and get to 5.5 is because of the handling of the response.
It's not, and wink, wink, we know it's not perfect, but it will get better over time. But there's been drastic improvements, right? Especially on response times and latencies. You'll see when you click on a menu item, for example, it should be much better. So last year, hopefully none of you were here when I was on stage. I made a bold statement that the VI client was going away after 5.1. Surprise! It's not going away in 5.1. It's still here in 5.5. But I will make an equally bold statement that it will be gone next year. We kept it around. There's a reason I'm making such a bold statement. We had to keep the VI client around for 2 or 3 major use cases, right? One, of course, is the update manager. I assume most people use the update manager. It's still the host client solution. So if you still want to manage your host, it's still the way to go. And then there's a couple of solutions, key solutions that everyone uses, like Site Recovery Manager, that still leverage the C client. Thank you for that. But what I find is most people hate it initially. After 2 days of playing with the web client, they say, I actually see what you're trying to do here. It makes a lot of sense. So you're going to tell me, okay, Amit, you can't really deprecate it unless I have 2 key things. The performance has to be drastically better, and you need all of my solutions. I need all of my solutions. I can't go, just to prove that we really intend on ending of life the VI client was actually a message in the 5.5 VI client that says this is the last version. So we have to do it. You'll start to see a lot more VMware solutions. There's a partial list here, and third-party solutions that will start to appear in the web client going forward. So by the beginning of next year, by Q1 of next year, you'll have all the storage vendors and all the server vendors will have their plugins for the web client. So you no longer have any reason to go back to the VI client for that.
If you have a vendor that falls into that's not on that list, keep pressuring them that, hey, VMware's going down this path. We need the interaction between the solutions. There is obviously a re-engineering because we're going from typically what was a C# desktop client plugin to a web services plugin. But keep the pressure on them to get these plugins out because you're not the only user or the use case for using the web client with that solution that tied in. So do keep the pressure on.
Yeah. If you notice, there's one key storage vendor missing here, but they're coming in Q1, so they'll be there too. So I wanted to briefly talk about the database. I told you this is more than just SSO. We do spend a lot of time with SSO. But when we talked about improvement of performance on the vCenter server itself, we found that the big bottleneck actually comes from the database itself. And if we broke that down, it falls into 3 general categories. The first is when vCenter tries to insert the stats. The next is when you want to roll up the stats for granularity. And last is when you try to purge your stats, right? So clearly stats plays a huge performance bottleneck here for us. What you're going to find we started doing with 5.1 and continue into 5.5 is fix each of these areas in certain key ways. And I want to leave time to get to SSO, so I'll just fly through these fairly quickly. One thing we did is we took this massive database table for all the stats and shattered it into little pieces. This makes it faster for reads and writes. Can I ask, does anyone run their stats level at more than level 1? Oh, really? I didn't think it was possible. Okay, that's great. What we would hear from people, customers tell us is if I move it to 2, VC crashes. So I'm really glad to hear 2 of you have managed to do that.
The VCs are crashing.
I'm sorry?
The VCs are crashing.
The VCs are crashing, yeah, okay, I see. So one of the things you'll find, this is one of the big reasons that was possible, that happened, right? And so we fixed that. So you'll find that the roll-ups happen much faster and there's no collision between insertion of stats and rolling up of stats. So there's no more of these annoying little gaps in data that you have with 5.1 and before, 5.0 and before. We've taken care of those problems. And of course, we've sped up the purging speed. So all of this really says that we focused a lot, by fixing database performance and focusing on the database, you'll find a much faster and better performance around vCenter in general.
Yeah, 85% of the database is actually statistical information. Your hosts are updating, groups of hosts every 5 minutes are sending their statistics in, and then we place them in the 4 tables. And obviously the idea prior to 5.1 The time it takes to get that information from a very big table can have a challenge on the performance of vCenter, and by partitioning them allows us to take those roll-up jobs from a partition aspect and handle that data much more effectively. And from my personal opinion, if you're not on 5.1 or 5.5, that's the major reason to get to that because of the changes on the database side. You'll have a much snappier responding vCenter server environment with that. So if you're not on 5.1 or 5.5, get the ISO downloaded tonight and start it while we're at the party. So.
Nothing is a more successful install than the drunk install, I guess. But, so then I do want to briefly touch on the appliance. Those of you who played with 5.5, even in a demo environment, see that it's not so drastically different, right? Oracle is still the external database of support. I've been told there is a SQL driver out there somewhere, but I haven't yet seen it.
Yeah, so Microsoft has a technical preview of a SUSE ODBC driver, and we've been doing some testing. We want everyone to adopt the appliance. The appliance certainly makes sense from many angles: deployment, updates, upgrades, consolidation, things like that. And so with this driver, a lot of customers, especially in the US, have said they want to use the appliance, but they want to maintain a SQL Server database. And there's many valid reasons for doing that. I just want to have a show of hands. Who would be interested if that was a possibility of running the appliance with a SQL Server?
Okay.
Okay, so that's a good 40 to 50%. So obviously we can't do anything until Microsoft productizes that driver, and then we'll be able to obviously pass that on to you guys at that point as well.
Right, so I just point out here that you'll see that the host and VMs are better than they were in 5.1, not yet where we are with the Windows install, but wink wink, that is the direction we want to go to, right? And are there any VMware marketing people in the room? Okay, yeah, clearly we want them to be peers as time goes on. Don't tweet that. But in general, and in fact, we even said it here explicitly, right? That we want the direction as we go forward. We won't get rid of the Windows install immediately or in the foreseeable future, but we want to make the appliance a natural peer to that, right? And you'll start to see all these feature sets start to come in over time.
Yeah, I just want to add, Amit, the appliance, obviously, for those that do upgrades, that do fresh install upgrades, where you start over, definitely a good time to take a look at the appliance, because we do not have today a migration story to take your Windows configuration and put it into the appliance. There are some unsupported ways of doing some of that configuration transfer, but in general, from a VMware standpoint, you'd have to start afresh. But once you're on the appliance, next year when we come back with another release, doing an update to an update pack, service pack, or to an upgrade to a major version is so much easier once it's in the appliance. And so getting you, in that direction that's definitely something to start looking at because of the benefits there. The deploying an appliance is very straightforward, and it's all time-saving events that help you to do what's necessary in the environment and not concentrate on vCenter itself. So these are things that all help us all out, really.
So in promising a deep dive, we did want to talk about some of the things, right? If this is a picture, if people wanted to take pictures, these are probably the slides that they want to take pictures of. Not that they're fascinating slides, but these are the minimum install requirements you'll see for the vCenter server, right? And broken down by component. I do want to emphasize these are minimum requirements. So, and I want to actually show you the recommended requirements. You'll see they get a little bit beefier here. We're definitely saying 4 CPUs for the simple install, right? vCenter itself is a 2 CPU, web client is a 2 CPU. And so we definitely make those recommendations as best practice for your install.
We don't want you to skimp on resources. vCenter can get hungry, especially the inventory service can get pretty storage IO friendly. And so we do want you to give the resources necessary for vCenter to do its job. But at the same time, we don't want you to be running monster VMs just to run vCenter either. So we want to give you, there are multiple components. They do have their requirements, and this is a minimum. And did we take the other slide out?
No, it's right there.
Okay. So we have this one, which obviously is recommended, but take all your attention off of the numbers and look at the bottom. This is for 400 hosts, 4,000 VMs. So I know there's customers that will be hitting that or going way beyond. Most of our customers will fall a lot less than that. And so the idea is, you get the idea of what sizing requirement is for the environment that I would be going into.
Yeah.
And this is straight from the documentation on 5.5.
Yeah, this is a sliding scale. So if you have less than that, you obviously require less. We also wanted to, we keep in sync with OS vendors. So when they start to deprecate their OSs, we do the same. So you'll start to see here, I'll go through this quickly, this is fairly self-explanatory. But 2003 is no longer supported as a host operating system. And 2008, prior to SP2, is no longer supported either. When you move to SP2, you'll still get the same support for vCenter 5.5. And as usual, as Justin would say, go to his blog, and you can see all the things that he has there for.
And just a side note, if you are on 5.1 and you're on a 2008 base or SP1, and you need to get to SP2 before you can proceed with the 5.5, there is a little bit of a gotcha to be aware of. Is with SSO in 5.1, we have a lockbox mechanism where we have attributes from the environment, the virtual machine itself, that create the security boundary. And when you do a service pack, that will actually update some of those attributes and thus stop you from starting vCenter post-update of a service pack. We do have KBs that discuss the process to go through if you are in that scenario where you need to get to SP2 before you can proceed. But I just wanted to throw that out there and make you aware. So.
Absolutely. And also, just on the upgrade path here, so VMware will support an in-place upgrade for 4.x and 5.0 and 5.1. Anything prior to that, though, we don't support a migration, right? So Justin is going to tell you the best practice here is to really do an in-place upgrade and then migrate post that. And of course, on the ESX, we support vCenter 5.5 will support ESX 4.x and later. Just a quick question: is anybody on an earlier version of ESX? Okay. Usually, those people don't get travel budget. There you are. So I didn't think that you would be here, but just in case, just to clarify. Okay, so the reason you're all here, right? This guy, Amit, talks a long time. I really want to hear a single sign-on. So Justin will talk about that in a brief moment. I just wanted to lay the groundwork, right? SSO, the single sign-on, was introduced in 5.1. It was not a roaring and massive success, to say the least, right? And we heard that very clearly. And so what we've done with 5.5 is, and actually give credit to the engineering team, some of whom are maybe here still, maybe here. We went back and rewrote it from the ground up and tested it in all user scenarios, right? And we'll get to all the places we know that we had holes. But in essence, we heard the feedback from the field. We know 5.1 wasn't the success that we wanted it to be, and so the goal was to do exactly the same to do better with 5.5 and do it internally. And that's exactly what we've done. So that's the mea culpa right there. I'll take the blame for that one. But so the question becomes, did we fully understand where we went wrong with 5.1? And so I briefly want to touch on that, and then I'll let Justin jump in and show how we were heroes. So I guess he gets to be the hero. The first one is Active Directory integration, right? We did, the way we did it, of course, through LDAP and everything like that, it did not work effectively in multi-forested environments or trusted domain environments. And we found out we didn't hit the scale requirements that some of our larger customers needed. And on top of that, the administrative tools that were available were not that many, right? The web client is a great way to set up, but not a great way to triage. We heard those complaints. The second one was, if you use internal certificates, does anybody use their own certificates? They're self-signed? Yeah. We didn't make that easy. We heard that. Lastly, with SSO 5.1, it came with a database, and so there was a whole part of installing a database. There was a whole part of backing up that database. It was obviously that's where your critical data is. It became very complicated and just another thing in your infrastructure to manage. We also heard that. And lastly, and we have some great tools here. We heard that if things went wrong, we just couldn't figure out what went wrong, right? And so these are the four major areas that constituted most of the complaints that we saw with 5.1 SSO. So I will let Justin run. Go ahead, be a hero, Justin.
So do you all agree with this? Did anyone like 5.1 with the SSO? No. Does anyone have mandates to stay a release behind, or for other solutions that don't obviously support 5.5 at that point in time, that have to stay behind? I want to share, you won't find anything publicized yet, but it's something that you will hear from me on the blog site very soon. But I'm going to go through the SSO 5.5, the component of vCenter 5.5. We are supporting backwards compatibility. So if you have to stay a version behind, you could actually go to SSO 5.5 and the web client 5.5, but keep the inventory service and the vCenter servers at 5.1 for whatever reasons. Obviously, we're in the business for moving software, and we want you to get all to 5.5, and there are benefits for going the whole stack. I just want to highlight that you will see very soon information on backwards compatibility. But obviously these issues were very dear to me. I was People still question why I'm still with VMware, because there's a lot of heartache, and we had a lot of tears and pain, but there were some fun times together as well. But SSO really did challenge us. And you know, we had these areas, but we set these areas here really as the primary goal for fixing SSO basically in the 5.5 release. So how do we do that? And let's have a look now. Well, we changed the architecture. You know, we had all of these configurations. You couldn't change your configuration. It was pretty much a reinstall in most senses. But we didn't give you any guidance either. But with this new architecture, we have a multi-master model. So we basically have a security token exchange, and we have a light LDAP type service for storing the information of users, groups and policies and things like that. What this allows us to do then is, with that multi-master model, we have built-in replication. So that allows me, I'm over the line, so they're going to tell me off. So we're filming this. But we have built-in replication. So when you go in and set up your first SSO instance for that first vCenter, you're going to have the Active Directory information or the Open LDAP information. And any users that you may have configured or policies you define, that's all automatically going to appear as you add your second instance, your third instance, etc., into the environment without you having to do anything. This would be similar to multi-site in a 5.1, and we'll actually look at that in a second. But with all of this architecture, we want every customer basically to, for ease of management, to set up one vSphere.local, which is the new name for the security domain in 5.5. We're kind of more FQDN compliant now. And with that, as you add additional vCenters, obviously we want to maintain that single SSO security domain, because that gives you a single management component for the SSO. You could deploy all of these isolated or individually. Unfortunately, we don't let you change the domain name, the security name. It's fixed for vSphere.local, something that may change in the future, but not today. And so you would have the same duplicate security domain, but with separate security, so there'll be no replication occurring if you don't add them in as this. And so this model will obviously allow you to have site awareness. This is something for future releases, but we've added the component into single sign-on so that we can, you know, as we go forward with, say, global placement and DR and things like that, we have the ability to utilize sites. But in 5.5, the sites are really more of a notion of a logical grouping today. And this obviously then allows us to have multi-tenancy. So we can have multiple directories attached and available for resources in the environment. And that's what SSO is. SSO is purely the delivery of accounts that can be assigned permissions with. It's nothing more than that. All we're doing is providing local users and groups within the directory itself, or taking your Active Directory users and groups or your Open LDAP flavors to be able to be assigned permissions, so that I can log in to the environment, and anything that's registered, all of vCenter components registered with SSO, I'm already authenticated with, and I can communicate and manage and administer as necessary without getting multiple login pages, for example. And we're really going to expand on this across all of our solutions as they get upgraded and updated. But back to the architecture, we've got also the database. You're going to love this one, because there is no database. We got rid of that and we put it into a directory store that's part of embedded into the SSO itself. The installation. You know, there was lots of blogs, lots of comments, lots of white papers for all different scenarios. We've now got a single deployment model. You basically get asked one question. I have a video which I was trying to get in, but I left my laptop back at the hotel. But basically, this is really simplified. You go through the next, and then is this my first SSO instance, my only vCenter? I'll select that, or my first of many, I'll select that. It will update or create my vSphere.local security domain. And then I'll continue with all my vCenter products to be updated or installed at that point. If I have an additional one, I would choose a second option, which would basically say this is an additional SSO instance. I'm adding it into a previously defined security domain, and I have my security domain then that's there, which will be used for things like linked mode to be enabled at that point. So the installation is literally 9 clicks, and it's really simplified over what we did with 5.1. And then tools, as Amit mentioned, there was strange error messages, logs didn't give much information. and we really had no way of troubleshooting the environment. And so these tools were really designed for our support team, but I fought, and there's a lot of benefit for you having these in your environment, especially if you have a large environment, because they have, we'll talk about them in a second, but we have a full suite of an MMC console snap-in tools to be able to do administration on the directory side, on the certificate side, on the replication side. We can manage all of this through these MMC tools. Now, in general, your day-to-day administration is all going to be through the web client. You'll have the ability to use user administration, group administration, permissions, and add identity sources through the web client. But if you need to go beyond that functionality, this is where these tools really come into play. And if you have, I have a customer that has over 160 vCenters in their environment. And so they're going to need tools like this because they don't want 160 VCs all replicating with their SSO servers at the same time. They want to be able to manage and control that, especially over those WAN links, as well as provide a level of redundancy at the same time. So we provide all of that with the 5.5 release. So there are some prerequisites. We are now, one of the challenges we had with 5.1 was we were using LDAP for our server connectivity. Talking to an Active Directory over LDAP basically says, you're my domain, do you have this user? And it's going to be yes or no. But we also know customers have alternative or child domains, multiple forests, one-way trust, two-way trust. LDAP was really challenged when we had that type of communication, as I see a couple of heads nodding here. And so we changed the authentication mechanism over to Kerberos. And basically, what we do now is we are an object in Active Directory, whether it's the machine account that we're using for the SSO server itself, or we can have the ability to create a service principal name, an SPN, where we can provide that authentication for you. And then we say, go to a GC and go and get me authenticated with a DC, these credentials, and let Active Directory do what it's designed to do at that point. We don't want to be doing it for that. And so that's really some of the benefit we've had. But because we're using Kerberos, just like Microsoft had with their Active Directory in the early days, DNS has to be baked. You have to have DNS rock solid in your environment for that to work. And most of you should have that. I do very strangely from time to time get an email, what if I don't have DNS? Well, believe you, I do get those questions, and DNS is being mandatory for quite a long time now. There are ways around it, but typically every customer has. But the key thing is make sure it's baked. If you are using Active Directory, which if I ask for hands up, I pretty guarantee everyone will, but I'm going to ask, is anyone using Open LDAP or does not have Active Directory in their environment? Got a couple of hands. Is Open LDAP a flavor that you follow, or is there something else like an eDirectory or Apple Open Directory, something like that? eDirectory, okay. So we do have the schema defined today on Open LDAP for the default Open LDAP, which does affect some of the different flavors. But if you want to ping me offline after the conference, I'll take some, I want to get the feedback of the other flavors used out there. So if you are using something other than Active Directory, please let me know, and I will make sure that we get some awareness around that so we can add support easily for you. And then obviously, as we talked about, Amit talked about, we have to start with 2008 SP2. We have supported Windows 2012 since Update 1 earlier this year. R2 is about to ship. We will not have support for R2 until the next release, the next update of the 5.5, which will be Update 1. And whenever that time frame comes, it's usually about 6 months or so. But we won't be adding R2 until then. And there are differences. It's not like before where it would work, we just hadn't given you a support clause around it. There are some functionality changes with the way Adam is used with 2012 R2 compared to 2012 standard. Okay? And we are working on obviously getting that fully baked for you. So we have a couple of components. We are obviously installing Kerberos. We have the security token exchange service put in. So the installer puts all of these in quietly in the background. And then these installer steps. This is how simple it is, and this is what I have the video of. But it's, click, click, click. Is this my first one, or set an additional one? Password, click, 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 I'm installed. That's as simple as it is to input SSO into the environment now. Okay? But we know you spent a lot of time with the 5.1 environment. There's lots of hours there, a lot of tears, as we said. And you've got it drilled into your head that you're using system-domain, and now we've gone and changed it to vSphere.local. Well, we actually alias the system-domain to the new vSphere local. So if you do by accident type in admin at system-domain, because that's what you've been used to doing, it will actually alias to the administrator at vSphere.local. The password that you set for administrator.vSphere.local will be the password for that admin at system-domain. So that's the one thing that we have carried over, but that's going to be just for one release. Hopefully we can get everyone off of the 5.1. And I don't want to discredit 5.1. 5.1 update 1B is relatively stable now. You've all gone through the heartache, the pain, but if you're not at 5.1, you can jump and go straight to 5.5. This is where the changes have occurred, where that heartache was felt in 5.1. And so, say thank you to those that spent all of those hours, but I'm moving on and I'm going straight to 5.5. Okay. So what we got here? So obviously, we had these configurations in 5.1. We didn't really give you any guidance, but at the end of the day, we really, we were on stage telling you to distribute everything, and then there was mixed messaging, there was no guidance or anything, and so we have a mixture of standalone environments, we have distributed environments, we have SSO in all of these weird configurations being SSO HA, which really wasn't HA, and multi-site, which was very manual. So we do support in-place upgrades of those components today and keep them as they are. And we'll actually show you that. But obviously, with this new architecture, there's really better ways of using the configuration. So we'd really recommend, we have done a full reversal. You, our customers, have told us the distributed model adds complexity. I've got multiple virtual machines for a single app. Operationally, that's challenging. For availability, backup, restore, that's also a challenge. And so we've heard you loud and clear, and our recommendations is a reversal to deploy everything as a single machine. That is the best way to get the maximum out of your vCenter environment. And we have a session tomorrow on the performance of vCenter, and that will really highlight a lot of the reasons there on top of what the feedback we've received as well. Okay. So how does it look if we go from SSO in basic mode, which was a standalone configuration in 5.1, and go to 5.5? Well, we're going to have the same architecture. Nothing's changed at this point, but we have removed the database on the SSO side. Okay, so there is a VC database, but there is no SSO database. What about using a load balancer? Well, if we do an in-place upgrade, we can maintain that. We actually could go beyond the 2-node limit of that load balancer with the 5.5, because in 5.5 it's multi-master. We're actually active-active. We're doing the replication between the nodes ourselves, and the load balancer can point to whichever one you want. But the key thing I want to put here is, yes, we fixed some of the issues that were with the load balancer in 5.1, meaning when you failed over, there were some restrictions into administration and restart capability. In 5.5, we have fixed those. But adding a load balancer, as much as we have a great product called VCNS, not everyone has VCNS in their environments. And it's typically a third-party solution that adds another level of management, another level of complexity that either you have to know or you have to get your network team to understand to be able to deploy this for you. And so this is still a fully supported and usable configuration. Just ask yourself if you're up for the challenge, is how I'll leave that one with you. And then obviously we had multi-site. The only reason to use multi-site in 5.1 was to use linked mode. There was no other reason. But because linked mode means I'm talking to multiple vCenters to bring them together, I had to do all of this manual work with the configuration on the database, the local database side. So with 5.5, if we do an in-place upgrade, we no longer have a primary and a multi-site notion. Each one is a multi-master, they're the same deployment, and we have all the replication built in. And this can be used for linked mode, or even if you don't use linked mode, for a single SSO administration of the SSO environment across multiple vCenters at this point. The one thing I want to just point out here is we have a simple installer and a custom installer, which we talked about. Today, if you do run the simple installer, you don't get the option to add to an existing SSO pre-populated the vSphere.local. It'll only go through the basic node where it creates that. So if you do 2 VCs with the simple installer, you have 2 duplicate security domains. We are making a change to that very soon. but you don't want to be put in that scenario. You want to use a simple installer for the first and only, or the first of many, then you would use the custom installer. And you will hear definitely from me when that change is put in place, where you will be able to use a simple installer to actually add to an existing domain, security domain. So what is an identity source? Well, I've kind of gave you a high overview of what SSO is. It's delivering capacity or resource of users that can be assigned permissions within the environment and eventually over multiple solutions. But we have this thing where we attach identity sources. So identity source is really something, your Active Directory, your Open LDAP directory. And we have 4 types of identity source that we can use. When you do an upgrade from 5.1, you're going to be using LDAP for your Active Directory communication. During that upgrade process, we will convert that to native Active Directory. What that means is you are then using Active Directory in the proper sense, being an object that's getting authentication services passed across. We can go across one-way trust, two-way trust, multiple forests. This is the option that you need to use and pretty much the default. We've only kept LDAP around for backwards compatibility with 5.1 environments for Active Directory communication. But we also have the option for Open LDAP, and we talked a little bit about that just now. And we have the ability to add local OS. Now, local OS is something we really want to push away from. It's been a common thing. You deploy vCenter in the early days. We'll take the local operating system administrators group, we'll give it VI admins, and then you come along and just start adding domain users into that local group, which has the VI admin permissions. We actually, when the distributed model, that could be a challenge because it would be local OS users to the SSO server itself, not necessarily VC, so you could potentially be locked out or wrong permissions defined at that point. But the best place to put, if you need users outside of your identity source, the best place to put those users is in the single sign-on server itself. We have the ability to create users, we have the ability to define groups, put those users in groups. We can take users from an Active Directory, put them into an SSO group, and assign permissions that way. We really want to move away the notion of using local operating system accounts. We still have the ability today, but it's better to put it in a more trusted scenario, which would be your Active Directory, or at the very least, SSO itself. But because of this, there's a little note here. When you were doing this prior to SSO, the host was really handling that authentication request. So the host could say, hey, that's a local group that's got some domain users in. I'm part of a domain, I can go and authenticate that. Well, now SSO is doing that authentication process, not the local host. So if we're going to a permission that's in a local group and it's a domain user, it only knows about going to the local OS for authentication or going to Active Directory in the example for authentication. You won't be able to get authenticated through that group as a permission in vCenter. So we do need you to update the permissions to reflect the application going straight, the permission itself reflecting your domain username or your SSO username or local OS, but we don't want to mix and match those groups across those. So you don't want to put domain users in a local OS group and assign permissions that way, because that's not going to work, okay? Backup. So we've kind of done a full circle with backup, especially with virtualization, where we now typically go for backing up of the virtual machine as a whole rather than doing specific application type backups, or transaction level backups is the correct sense. So we still have, for virtual machines, we have the flavors of snapshot technologies out there, whether it's VMware or third party at that point. We still have table disk. We still want you to do backups. There's no excuse not to do backups. The one thing I want to highlight here is with the release of 5.5, VDP, VMware Data Protection, now allows you to do host level restore. In the past, you would have a VM that you'd backed up, and you could back up the vCenter VM, but you needed to point it to vCenter to say, hey, where do you want me to restore this virtual machine? With 5.5, you can use VDP and point it to a host directly to restore that virtual machine. So therefore, you have another option for backup with a VMware solution for backing up of vCenter as well, okay? But if you do need to do more of a transactional level, we do have a knowledge base article. I need to update this. That slide, that KB is out there. I need to put the number in this, but basically we give you, there's a couple of registry keys that need to be backed up, your SSL certs, we have the directory structure as well that needs to be backed up to provide that level of functionality. And then this also kind of falls along the line of availability. I spoke with many customers with the 5.1, and all the heartache aside, many customers were going out of their way to make SSO 5.9s available. And then vCenter had either no protection or just something like vSphere HA. SSO is the authentication component of the vCenter server. They're joined at the hip. One is useless without the other. If vCenter goes down, SSO could still be running, but it's not going to be doing anything today. In the future, that could change, but today, SSO only functioning for that vCenter, and vice versa. So you really need to apply, if you need availability of your SSO solution, it's really what you define as your RPO or your time objective RTO to the vCenter service as a solution itself. And that, whatever you apply for vCenter will be the same adequate level of protection for the single sign-on. Obviously, that all falls into place if we do it on a single virtual machine. We can apply the same policy at the machine level. If we distribute it, we obviously, that plays in with that. So VMware has a couple of products. We've talked about VDP in 5.5 for backup. vSphere HA is a solution if we virtualize. Does anyone have a physical vCenter server? We got one hand, couple of hands. Okay, is this more of a, not to get off topic here, is this more of just that's the way it's always been, or have a go-to machine if something goes wrong to get to that service? Because I've been pretty successful at getting people to virtualize vCenter. And I don't want to challenge anyone with that today, but there are, the most common notion is if everything's down, where do I go to start bringing things back on and reconfiguring things like that? Well, you can actually take care of virtualizing VC, and either, if it's on a LUN, you can go to any host and mount that VM to that host and connect to it that way. Or if you have to have a go-to machine, run ESXi on that host and do a one virtual machine, or have the database and the vCenter as the two VMs on that go-to host. That way you get the benefit of what you need, a go-to machine, but you also have the benefit of virtualization, being able to use snapshots and things like that at the same time. Okay, so moving on. So some of the diagnostic tools that we've put in place, obviously we talked a little bit about them. We're going to go through, I think, one or two of them. But these tools were designed for our support engineers to use. There is some huge benefit for you, as I mentioned, with larger environments, changing replication, looking at my certificates, things like that. They are not part of the download site. Today you would have to ask our support services to get them to you, but we are working on getting them added as on the resource page or something like that. So here's an example of one of them. We can log into our MMC tool, and I can see I've got my, my SSO host here, and I can see who it's replicating from. When you define an additional SSO instance, you're going to say, who am I going to get my updates from? Who am I going to replicate from? Now that could always be the first server, or you could, depending on scenarios where you have multiple VCs, multiple SSO instances across sites, you may pick a master for each site to have all the chain of replication occur. It is LDAP replication, so the replication occurs every 30 seconds, but I can go in and update this, so if I made the wrong decision during that installation, I can go in and update that replication partner to say only these two go across the WAN link and everyone else feeds off of those two masters on each end of that WAN link, for example. We have the ability to provide that level of functionality. And there's actually a really nice network map. When you log into this tool, this is a pre-release version, but we actually have a network map of all your replication instances and partners with arrows showing which way all the replication is occurring as well. We also have for certificates. We can go in. Now this is not a replacement for the certificate tool. There was a good 20% of this room do change their certificates. We understand that more and more people are beginning to do this, and we're working on making that much easier for you. We've updated the SSL automation tool, which is a tool, if you are required to change your certificates or just prefer to change your certificates, you would go off and generate the certificates we need, and then we would use this command line tool. We have one for 5.1, we have one for 5.5. And you'll be able to use the tools to inject those certificates into your vCenter environment, where all those components will be updated with the new certificate, the registrations, etc. But you can also use the MMC tool to go in and look at the certificates that you have in there. You can actually add certificates in here. You can't generate the CSR that causes the registration with the individual component, but you have some eyes on the certificates in your environment now. And this is definitely something that we're going to be expanding on. So we always get told our deep dives aren't deep enough. We struggle to get as much information out to you in a short period of time. And so we're going to go deep right now. We've got the installer logs. These are logs that you would see being generated during the installation. They're not really of much interest unless things go wrong, but these logs will help you understand those components and what failed, sort of thing. But then we have the operational logs. But before you take those pictures, hold off, because this is the one that's the important one. This will show the STS. This will show you authentication. You'll be able to follow this log and see tokens being generated, requested, and things like that. So this, if logins become a problem, this is the log to go check out. And that's what single sign-on is providing for you. All right. iPad's down. All right. So unfortunately, we've moved on. We talked about the OS, depreciated with 2003. And obviously some of the service packs. There's a few other areas also. NIS is being dropped as well. Do we have any customers that use NIS in their environment? We've got one over there, so I apologies. We also had the ability in 5.1 to provide multiple default domains. What does that mean? Well, I can log in as Justin and it will automatically populate at vmware.com. That's not my email address, so don't spam whoever it is. But I had the ability to pre-populate my domain. Now, with the new architecture and the native Active Directory, we no longer need to do that. So you can still select one default domain, but when it's in terms of Active Directory, that would be the one that you would set, because regardless of being in a child domain or another forest, as long as a trusts are in place, Active Directory is going to find you and add that in. So you don't need to have multiple default domains. And so thus we've removed that. And obviously, we've got some SMTP configuration that's been removed as well. If you are doing this over WAN links, we've also got to be concerned about ports used. We have the ports used by SSO here, are the typical ones. The ones to be aware of, we are doing LDAP replication, but we're not using the default LDAP ports. vCenter has that tied up for us at this point in time. And so we have 11.7.11 and 11.7.12 as the LDAP ports that we're using. So they will need to be opened if you're using firewalls or anything like that. So is everyone, these slides will be available after the show or after the conference. So let's talk about reference architecture. We openly admit we didn't give you the guidance with all the items that were going on with the 5.1. Resources were a little tight, but we wanted to kind of give you something. This is how we want you to deploy vCenter. This is where you'll get the best of vCenter itself. And really what it comes down to, a single virtual machine. For you on 4X and 5.0, this is how you are today, so why change it? There was no real benefit of distributing the components other than running multiple machines with smaller resources. Overly combined, they would still match, if not be greater in sizing requirements. But this can, if sized correctly, handle maximum scale. That means you could run a single virtual machine managing 1,000 hosts, 10,000 virtual machines. Anyone doing that? Got one at the back there. Great. I want to talk to you after. But a single virtual machine is the simple way to get the best. As I said, the performance. vCenter is heavily dependent on latency. Bringing everything together helps achieve the optimal performance with latency involved, because there is no latency at that point. We're not going across any wires or anything like that. So this really is the best. What if I have multiple vCenters? And I want to get a show of hands here. Who has more than one vCenter in their environment, in a single physical location? So a couple of hands, and multiple locations, be like a DR site, things like that. So about, okay. Wow. So how would I use this then? This is the architecture. We still want the single VM model. We want to maintain that SSO security domain, the vSphere.local, but we'd have all that built-in replication between them for the users and groups and things like that. Now today, vCenter still is registered with the instance of SSO that you provide during install or upgrade. If that SSO instance goes down, then VC is not going to move to another SSO instance. But if you have SSO local to vCenter, if SSO is down, vCenter is pretty much down as well at that point. And so there's no chicken and the egg scenario with that. There is no failover in the solution. That is something that is popular with Active Directory services and solutions, and it could be something that we may look into. But running SSO local to the vCenter is not a scenario that you're going to fall into. So we do have this. We have this site awareness. Obviously, if you have linked mode, you will need to keep the same security domain. We want you to do that. That's an absolute recommendation. And this will provide you with that functionality. This can be same site, separate sites. It doesn't matter as long as they're all part of the same vSphere.local. And then availability, it's really up to you. What are your defined definitions for recovery point or recovery time? Whatever you set for yourself, how long you can go with vCenter being down, is the solution or the technology that you would use for providing that. VMware provides vSphere HA. For virtual machine restores, and we also have vCenter Server Heartbeat for providing redundancy and monitoring as well. Okay, we're almost getting to the end. But what if I'm a large customer? We've got a guy at the back here with 1,000 hosts, 10,000 VMs, so he says, I believe him, in his environment. What if I have multiple vCenters? Well, we also have the ability, if we have, actually, this number has actually changed. It's gone through a couple of edits. But we're recommending if you have less than 8, just do the local SSO instance and do peer-to-peer. If you have more than 8 or more vCenters in a single physical location, let's not have all that chit-chat going on with the replication and the communications between SSO and the various components. Let's help optimize some of that. And so what we can do then in that scenario is, and it's a soft limit, but you're not really going to see any benefit. Centralize the SSO environment, and then you can put the web client on there as well. That will give you a single URL into the environment, and that helps reduce the amount of traffic. But as I said, this is really only for very large environments. One issue that came about with this, I did blog about it, and it was removed due to some frustration. But if you have this scenario, we want all of the components of vCenter for support to be on the same version. So if you go to do an upgrade, you pretty much have to do every vCenter in that scenario to get that, to maintain that level of support. As I mentioned, with 5.5, we allow you to have backwards compatibility. You will see messaging on this very shortly, and so you can stage your upgrades. We do want you to get everything up to 5.5, but you can stage those. So if you do have view in the picture, you can leave that vCenter with using a 5.5 SSO, for example, and update my server infrastructure vCenters to 5.5, etc. So I have that flexibility to provide that as necessary. So with that in mind, how does this roll out? If I go from my small shop and I expand, I've got my single VM with everything running in one site. I have a second site. I can add to this. This can all be part of the same security. And then we can also go beyond that and add and mix and match the different sites with the different infrastructures. There was a slight change to this graphic prior to San Francisco in here. We had the vCenter appliance in this model. The vCenter appliance is limited to the first and only SSO instance itself, or it can be attached to another SSO instance, but it cannot participate today in the replication. That is something that we are working on, but we don't have that functionality to have SSO on the appliance replicating, okay? And that's about everything. Thanks for staying, especially with beer. We'll take some questions. I don't know how much long. We're pretty much running out of time. But we'll take a few questions, and then. Please do fill out the survey. Make us, tell us if this works. What you liked, what you didn't like, and we can only make these sessions better. They're hugely popular. They get repeated every year, but we can only make them better and better with your feedback. So thank you for everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
So we have no microphones, no questions.
You can call it up.
I'll leave the mic on for anyone that has questions that comes up here, or we have some mics running around here. So if you want to listen to the questions, we'll be around for a few minutes. You have a question?
In a site recovery manager environment, can you replicate the zone between the two vCenters? or is it not supported?
So with a site recovery manager, can you replicate the vCenter between the two sites or the SSO piece? So with SRM treats sites separately. You basically replicating between sites, and you can replicate the virtual machines, but they're not going to provide you any functionality once you're on the DR side, because if SSO is not available, you won't be able to start any services up and be able to